IVM.
There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.
Many parents have yelled at their kids, and most of us feel pretty bad about it. In fact, a survey revealed that of all the things that induce guilt, being distracted by the phone, allowing too much screen time, or not cooking healthy meals, being remorseful about shouting top the list. But what can we do when our kids' behavior triggers us? How can we repair after we yell? Can we really do something to prevent yelling at our kids? Join Devishobha and I as we discuss these questions from the lens of research and our own experience as mothers in the latest episode of the Big Talk about Tiny Humans.
Almost every job in the world requires training, except parenting.
You need to learn parenting on the job, and that can be really hard.
Here on Big Talk about Tiny Humans, we want to help you navigate the world of parenting better and make your lives a little bit easier.
Hi everyone, I'm Meghna.
And hi, I'm Devishobha.
Every week we bring you the best research on parenting,
top tips from experts,
and actionable strategies to confront the numerous challenges that all parents and educators face.
So let's get started, shall we?
I remember this incident with my then preschooler a few years back. We had 15 minutes before leaving for the picnic. I told Mohil, please put on your shoes and then you play. He continued playing with the ball. He was humming a song. 5 minutes later, I am coming in. Mohil, you still haven't worn your shoes. We'll be late, beta. Come on, put them on now. Another 5 minutes later, where are your shoes? Why haven't you worn them yet? Why don't you listen to me? And you know what's the worst part was? He looked up at me as I was talking in Japanese. It's funny now, Shobha, but I was so frustrated looking at his blank face. I lost it. Something snapped inside me and I went berserk. I morphed from this rational parent to this screaming monster in seconds. And you know what? To make matters worse, I think my neighbors heard me because the window was open. I don't yell often, but when I do raise my voice, it's because something has really pushed me over the edge. And you know what's the surprising part? I know that I'm not alone in shouting. I know that a lot of parents, including the most well-intentioned ones, including the ones who swear by positive, responsive parenting, also yell at our kids. So Shobha, let's talk about yelling at our kids. And why is it so common? And what can we really do about it? And can we really do something about it? How are you doing, Shobha?
I'm doing good. Thank you, Meghna, for sharing that very, very relatable and a very, very common episode that almost every parent can relate to. I myself have done it many, many times, especially when they were younger. So, yeah, you were saying something?
Yeah, so I was saying that I also chosen, although I yell at my kids, I would admit that I do. I would like to hope and believe that it's reduced now that they're a little older.
Yeah.
But yes, when they were younger, much more so. But why, Shobha? Why is yelling at kids not desirable? In fact, people now say that yelling is the new spanking. Is it true? And why is it so? Should we really be as concerned about yelling?
Well, thanks for those questions. Very, very relevant questions. So first, I would like to begin by saying that yelling is a very socially acceptable way to get a child's attention and to deliver a reprimand, right? So spanking, definitely it induces a lot of guilt because it's obviously wrong. But yelling kind of, stays on the cusp. And, sometimes if you're not too harsh, then okay, you can still get results. But the thing is, we yell because of a lot of reasons. Some of those reasons can be physical because we are exhausted, we are distracted, we are stressed, right? But a lot of the reasons, when I did my research, for this episode specifically, I read up on a lot and I could say that most of it was true because the truth is really, if you're very self-introspective and if you want to be truthful to yourself, then you know that this is the truth. So these are the 5 reasons I think we yell, right? First is because we yell because we can. We yell at our kids because we can, right?
That is so true.
If you are pissed.
If it's my
with your
manager, I will not
coworker.
yell
Yeah.
at. Exactly. Thank
Yeah.
you. Exactly.
Yeah, you can be super pissed, but you will not yell at him or her just because you can't, right? But you can with your kids. And well, there are some theories that say that, well, it's your family, so you can, use them to bust your stress. But there are other ways to bust your stress. And this is not the most ideal way, right? So that is number one. The first reason is we do it because we can. Second is we yell because we think they are ticking us off on purpose, right? So see, again, there is a perspective shift. We think that, for example, especially it happens with older children, because we kind of think that now that they can respond, they have to be more responsible and responsive. If they don't respond immediately, it triggers us, right? So
why are you doing this to me?
Exactly. No, why are you ignoring me? Why can't you just pay attention? Why can't you do this as soon as I tell you to? Why don't you understand the urgency? Blah, 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 blah. Well, no. So that happens a lot. Third is because we yell because it gets us instant results. We can get them moving, we can get it done faster. So that is the third reason we yell. Fourth is because I think we yell because we can't really find a better way to get it done, right? At that point, there is no better solution. So we see that as the only way forward, and we just do it to get quick results and get the, problem solved in the moment, right? So, and finally, we yell because it's a habit we have formed. It's some kind of a frequency that we have also tuned to because we have also been yelled at, right?
Yeah.
So yelling is a very learned behavior. It's a habit that builds over time, and it's a habit that gets reinforced over time because there are no consequences, at least no immediate consequences that you can see. But it's not true that there are no consequences. There are lots of consequences. But since they're not very immediate, the habit is very hard to break, right? So it's really important that we need to be intentional about it. And yes, about the spanking part, I don't know if it's a new spanking because yelling can go very well with spanking. And for generations, people have been yelled at and spanked at. And at least spanking is spoken about, these days. But yelling is somewhat still the gray area. So
no, absolutely. I really like the bit where you said that we all yell and there is almost like a social acceptability to it.
Right.
If you go to a public place and a parent is hitting their child, you would still get dirty stares, right? Some people might even intervene and say, what are you doing? But if a parent is yelling at their child in public, nobody will bat their eyelid, right? It's that acceptable. So, okay, that's interesting. We discussed some of the causes or some of the reasons why yelling happens. On this note, let's take a break and we'll come back and discuss what are the adverse effects of yelling on kids? What are the consequences, what Shobha was talking about?
Hello. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Advertising is Dead, Varun talks to artist manager Ayushman Sinha about what it's like managing a musician in the age of social media. On The Wire Talks, Siddharth learns about the rise and fall of the Sassoon dynasty from Professor Joseph Sassoon. On Audio Gyan, Kedar talks to co-founders Dakshayani and Mandar about their NGO Baithak Foundation. On Marathi Khidkitun, the Deshmukhs speak to Jairaj Salgaonkar, managing director of Kal Nirnay, about Almanac Publishing. And on Big Talks about Tiny Humans, Devishobha and Meghna share strategies to deal with sibling rivalry. Do follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, do tell a friend. It really helps us out a lot. Also, don't forget to rate us on any platforms you're listening on, and you can also check us out on YouTube. We are also doing a small listener survey to better understand how you respond to our shows and advertising on the network. We would really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes to fill it. It helps us build better shows for you. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week, SBI Life Insurance, India Water Portal, and Jupiter, a digital banking app.
Welcome back. You're listening to our episode on yelling. So, Shobha, we were talking about the reasons why parents yell, right? And it's a little bit below the belt because the worst part is that we are in a way misusing or abusing our power, right? I mean, the first reason that you said that we yell because we can, it really hit home hard. I mean, I think It's just so unfortunate that we think that we have that power and control over our kids, right?
Right.
But I really want to know, there's a reason why we feel so guilty after yelling, right? There's intuitively we know what our kids go through, right? It breaks at our very connection at our kids. So I would like you to offer a very research-based perspective, what science tells us about the impact that yelling has on our kids.
Sure. So, like I said, yelling is something we do to relay urgency, right? In that situation at the moment to our children and to, even to other people, right? It is done to relay a sense of urgency that we need it done now, right now, right? So that is the feeling that we want to relay, and that is the feeling we want to establish. That's the environment we want to create, right? However, when we yell, right, especially on very young kids, right? What happens is, since their nervous systems are just developing, they're very sensitive, and yelling can be very scary for them. And not just the yelling, the facial expressions that accompany yelling, they can be really scary for the kid, right? And what happens is they will decide to alter their behavior at the moment, definitely. Not because they want to or they have decided to alter their behavior for bigger reasons, but they just want you to stop yelling, or they just want to stop looking at that expression on your face. So what happens is that this will really not lead to any sustainable long-term, behavioral changes. It is just a very quick fix, short-term approach that we take towards yelling, which can really harm them in during their development. And yelling changes the way their brains develop, because one study actually has compared, this is a study funded by the National Health Institute of Health in the US. And this study actually compared brain MRI scans of people who have experienced parental verbal abuse in childhood with the scans of those who did not experience abuse. And what they noticed was a very noticeable physical difference in the parts of the brain responsible for processing sounds and language especially. And this happens for a very obvious reason, because what happens when children listen to people yelling or significant adults yelling at them, is that they kind of tend to tune out, right, after a while. So their processing ability comes down, and which leads to permanent changes in their brain, especially. So this is very important. So this says that the parts of the brain responsible for processing sounds and language, right? How significant is that, right? That's because they are just tuning us out. And that happens as a survival instinct, as a natural way to defend themselves, a self-defense mechanism, right? And 3 is yelling can lead to depression in adolescence. It can lead to depression during adulthood, because parental abuse during childhood, you are a clinical psychologist yourself, and you must be seeing such cases, by the dozen, every day.
Absolutely.
And the connection between yelling, especially verbal abuse in very harsh manner, which, brings down the self-esteem of the individual, can lead to a lot of compromised mental health, right? And also physical health, subsequently physical health, because there's a study that has said that constant stress that children experience as a result of being exposed to yelling actually leads to manifestation of chronic health problems, chronic diseases in adulthood. Well, this is a longitudinal study that has been done, and the effects are, the correlation is pretty clear, right? And then this is for the kids, but then for the parents as well, right? For the parents, most of us end up feeling guilty after we yell at our kids. So shame, guilt is not a good emotion for parents as well, especially moms. And there's a study that also says that moms experience a lot of mom guilt compared to dads, right?
Yeah.
And that can have a toll on our mental health. The parents' mental health, and subsequently the physical health as well. So yelling is really prone to giving a lot of long-term negative results. And that is the reason we need to catch it and nip it in the bud, the entire habit.
Absolutely. I'm amazed at this study, actually, which, you talked about brain changes in language processing. That's fascinating, right? By yelling, we're actually changing the way our child develops their brain. It's crazy, right? So the one thing that struck me actually about what you were saying is when you brought in verbal abuse. Now, a lot of parents would not relate to that, because if you tell them that, you're yelling at your child, this amounts to verbal abuse, they will say, no, absolutely not. This is not verbal abuse. So is there really a difference between yelling and verbal abuse, the one that you were referring to, or are they one and the same?
Well, See, like we had discussed in the other episode, like the last episode where we had discussed that parents can easily slip into the red zone of shaming and criticizing. So, yelling in a way that, like I said, brings down the self image of the person, it will amount to verbal abuse, right? But if you can keep it, I mean, I'm not saying yelling is the best approach, but if you're yelling, at least keep it connected to the episode at hand, the incident at hand, and just address the problem that is occurring there. What we tend to do when we yell is that we connect past behaviors, past incidents, and then we kind of tag a person with certain qualities, right?
We label our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that becomes their self label, and that's the image they carry into adulthood, right? So that way it can really harm their personalities and have very long term impact as well. So
I remember, as you say, this brings up a memory. I grew up in Delhi, and the Punjabi influence is quite prevalent in Delhi, right? I remember this friend's house I used to go to. She was in my neighborhood, and her parents, being Kattar Punjabis, they used to yell at her in front of me. I mean, I'm sure they would be doing that otherwise as well. But they always used to say, "Ye to khotti hai, khotti." And khotti, khota or khotti basically means that not very loopy and not very smart. And that's a very derogatory thing actually to call anybody, least of all a child. I just remember how, dejected she would feel, and, almost like coming to expect it, and almost like, oh my God, it's just so unfortunate that without even realizing the kind of harm that we are perpetrating on our kids. And these are, because as a therapist, I can tell you that a lot of this are intergenerational cycles of trauma, trauma being passed on from one generation to another. I know that my mother attempted to, break the cycle by not hitting us, because she was hit very badly, she and all her siblings, by their parents. But she yelled. She used to yell at us. And I, on my part, am trying to break that intergenerational cycle by not yelling at my kids.
Right.
So the hope is that with each, generation will get better. And I firmly believe, Shobha, that if we have even just one generation of parents who are raising their kids and nurturing their kids in the, principles, using principles of positive, conscious, responsive parenting, we can change the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that same thing too. And that is the reason, that is all Kids Kinta's work is about. That's all Therapist Mommy's work is about, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yes,
So, okay, so let's get to a more optimistic outlook at this. What, I've also made a lot of videos on this, we feel guilty after we yell at our kids, but the mark of a good enough parent, the mark of a positive parent is not that you never yell. It's that you never make mistakes. It's never to, set up impossible standards for ourselves. We're not saying that you should be a perfect mom or dad. We are saying that it's okay to mess up. But the biggest thing is that you should repair after you mess up. So let's discuss, Shobha, what can we do? What can parents do to repair after they've yelled at their kids?
Yeah. So very beautiful question, very useful question to ask, I would say. So one of the things that child psychology, in fact, even general psychology says is that for every negative interaction with a loved one, right, you can bring down the negative effects with 5 positive interactions.
That's the magic ratio, right?
Yes, 1:5.
Yes.
So for every negative interaction, so if you have yelled once, attempt to at least give like 5 positive experiences to the child. It can be very simple, like a gentle touch, to a hug, to a smile, to an acknowledgement, to praise for the effort or the work that they're putting in, to make them feel seen or heard. So the way I do it, and I do it, this is one of the generational cycles I have broken, but I can talk for myself, is that after I've been through a cycle of yelling or just losing control, what I do, or not even that, even if I know that I have done something not appropriate, right? So what I do is I immediately own the guilt and I apologize and I ask for forgiveness, no matter what their age was. From a very young age, I have taught them through example, not like say sorry, when
so
they
modeling,
fight.
basically.
Yeah, basically. So it's like when 2 children fight, we say, "Abhi chalo chalo, sorry bolo."
Sorry bolo. That's the worst thing.
So
We're
they will
actually
just,
teaching them to lie. Actually,
yeah,
think about it. We're teaching them to lie by forcing an apology.
yeah. Absolutely. And they don't even mean it. So when they don't mean it, we again say, chalo, chalo, abhi batao. I mean, they say it the way that you mean it. Feel karke batao, So they don't know how the hell to do it, right? So
And we are forcing feelings, which is like, oh my God, the last thing we should be doing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think one of the first steps is to understand. So when you're calm and collected, right? One is to own the guilt, right? Own the action, own the responsibility for it. And one of the hardest things I think for a parent to do is to really come to terms with the fact that you have hurt your child, big or small, you have hurt them in a way, and no parent wants to do that intentionally. Right. So, first of all, come to terms with the fact. And then second is you come down and ask for forgiveness, because all said and done, in my experience at least, and I see that a lot of parents also come to me with the same kind of experiences, same kind of feelings. It's like, after we are done with all the showdown, right? When you talk to the child, right, you will know that the child had a bloody good reason to do what they did. You just didn't see it at that time because you were hyper. You just couldn't see it. You were on an emotional high, right? So in almost 85% of the cases, in my experience, they had a good reason for doing what they did, right? I just didn't have pause to see why they're doing what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
So definitely talk to them later on, understand their stance. So basically, it's just trying to understand why they are behaving the way they are being, right? And don't be vague about your apology. Just apologize like straight and clear. Say that I was wrong. I will try to, control this behavior from the next time onwards. But these are the triggers, right? And I don't want this happening. Right.
Yeah.
So be very clear, be very persistent, and be very consistent in your communication, but do ask for forgiveness. Apologize. There's nothing wrong in apologizing. Right. And let them know that you're working too. My sister, she told me that, she tells her kids that, you know what, you are growing up. You are a child, but you know what? I'm growing up as a mother too. So let me also make mistakes. Give me room for mistakes and I'll work on it with you. So, that's a great way to have a conversation with your child and really, really build a bond.
Okay. So Shobha, that's great. I think it's very important to take home the message that we are not perfect and we do end up yelling. And there is definitely something that we can do to repair after we've yelled at our kids. But I'm curious because you also talked about triggers, right? So is there something we can do to recognize these triggers? And if yes, what is it that we can do to prevent yelling in the first place? And how do we go about doing that? When I'm exhausted and tired at the end of the day and my kids are just not listening to me, I am going to get triggered, right? So what can I do? And I really just want to get them to bed. So what can I do to not prevent myself from yelling? Yeah. So can we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you brought up a very good point of triggers, right? So why do we yell, or, why do we get into the zone of inappropriate behavior? That's because we are not tracking our triggers. We are not aware of the triggers at that moment, at least, right?
Yeah.
So the first step is, just if you remember all the episodes that have happened so far, if you just go back and remind yourself of how they happened, I think you'll find one or two common triggers that have really contributed to this. In my case, I get really upset when, I have diabetes. And if I have not eaten the previous day, if I've not eaten, if I've actually deprived myself of some food and still my sugars are high in the morning, I get pissed. Okay. And that carries for the entire day. And that's my trigger. And I invariably end up doing something inappropriate. So
absolutely, Shobha, bang on. There's actually a term for it. It's called hangry. When you're hungry and angry, it's called hangry.
No,
and
it's not even that I'm hangry at that point. I'm just pissed. I'm just pissed that, my efforts are not paying off.
Oh, so my trigger is getting hangry.
Yeah.
And my kids know. They're like, oh, when I start yelling, like, are you hangry? So I'm like, yeah, I think I am.
That happens with me too. And my younger daughter, she's very good at identifying people's triggers, everybody's triggers at home. My older one is like me. She also gets hangry and she starts behaving crazy. And she's like, Amma, please give her some food first.
What good self-awareness your kids have. They're only pointing out the problem. They're only suggesting the solution. I wish all kids were like that.
Yeah, just give her some food, then I'll talk to her. It's like kind of that. So another thing is, like I was saying, track your triggers, right? So there's this mom called Orange Rhinos. She actually started a no yell movement, right? And she's a mom who actually got pointed out by an outsider that she was yelling at her kids, and she made a vow not to yell at her kids, and she went on a 520-day streak of no yelling. She succeeded for 520 days not yelling at all with her kids, and she did it by actually making a tracking sheet of all her triggers, right? And it really helps. I mean, you don't really have to follow the same template, but it's just a matter of keeping track of what it is that triggers you. For example, if I see that, I have a joke, in my mind. This is a joke in my mind. So whenever I yell at my kids, when I look back, I'm pissed at the whole world, maybe somebody in Mars also, but I'm really...
really, okay, thanks for clarifying that.
But really, the only people I can, like I said, I can yell at is my kids, and I do that, right?
Well, so that includes in my family, that includes my husband as well. But yeah, that's a lot of times I displace my kids' anger onto him and I start yelling at him, and then my husband and my kids, they look at each other like, okay, do you know who's the real culprit here? So
yeah, absolutely. So that happens. The reverse also happens. So so the tracking the triggers is step one. Then the second thing is to actually manage it with reinforcements, right? Find reinforcements. Like you said that, sometimes when you don't find the right time, you don't find the time to eat, or you don't find help with your kids, or you're just stressed. You don't have anybody to share. So reinforcements can be emotional. It can also be very practical, like, just get help, right? Just find, if you can't cook for the day, you're stressed, get food from outside. Don't, punish yourself by sticking to some standards like, I only have to cook this, I only have to eat this. Just, find a way to help yourself, right? So find reinforcements. So T for track your trigger, R for find your reinforcements. A is to create an action plan. So, we all live with routines, right? And we kind of know that, at this certain, for example, you said that when you were just trying to head out the door and you saw that your son did not heed to your instruction.
I would like to think of it as a request, but go on.
Okay. Yeah, your request. But he just did not heed to it because he had his own priorities, right? So you would know that these are the, highly sensitive time zones where you will have your, high trigger points. So create an action plan for that. For example, your son is not wearing his socks pair at that time. Maybe have an extra pair of socks in the car, right? That's an action plan. That'll remove your trigger and you're not that tense anymore, right? So that's about creating an action plan. So TRA. And then C is to change the scenery when you're sensing your triggers. So what happens is, when we are in the same environment, you just can't stop thinking about what has triggered you, or, it just kind of pervades your entire thought process. So it's best to remove yourself whenever you can from the situation. Obviously, at that time, when you're just heading out the door, your only way to remove yourself from the situation is to actually head out the door with him. But there are situations,
Or maybe just head out of the door alone and say, okay, bye, buddy. I'm off.
Yeah, but not
time.
Yeah, but there are many situations, I'm sure, where you can let it go and just remove yourself. So I also call
absolutely,
it, right? This is also called the time in method, whereas
time in, absolutely. No, I recommend this to parents all the time. I think once you're triggered and you're triggered, you really do need to regulate yourself. A dysregulated brain can't really achieve much, right? So I absolutely recommend that.
Yeah, that. And then, so we have discussed TRAC, and then we have E, that is evaluate long-term goals. So your long-term goal is not to get your child to consider yelling as the first step to conflict resolution, right? Your long-term goal is to teach them actual conflict resolution skills. So what skills can you model? Like, just breathe and then talk to them in a way that, gets you perspective about what is stopping them from doing what you're asking them to do. So that again is empathy and evaluation of alignment to long-term goals, all of this put together. So the mnemonic is trace, TRACE, T for track your triggers, R for find your reinforcements, A for create your action plan, and go through it every day, because we tend to forget in the heat of the moment. And C, change the scenario, especially when you're triggered. And E for evaluate long-term goals and align with it, right? Create small steps like, take deep breaths, or, call a friend, just talk to them and say that, you are pissed and you just want to
yell
laugh.
at them, and you should yell at them.
Or maybe just tell her that, what, tell me a joke, tell me something stupid, just make me laugh. And
I do that with my mom. I do that with my mom very often.
Yeah. So that's a good enough plan. It'll work for the time. So it'll just save you from the yelling moment. And these things, when done over time, I think it can really change families. It can change the family ethic, family culture. It can create a lot of positivity in the way we perceive our bonds.
No, absolutely. I love the concept of trace. There's one technique that I use actually with my kids. I don't know, where would you put that? I'm curious, maybe in T. So I've told my kids that when I do start yelling, when I'm in, very in a fit of anger, frustration, whatever it is, irritation, they should just make a non-verbal sign, like that stop sign with their hands. And that is like a cue for me to stop. So I've sort of, enlisted them as partners, as collaborators in me being able to stop, when I don't have control over myself. They help me sort of with this non-verbal sign. They're like, oh, mama, they make that sign that indicates to me, oh my God, I need to stop right now.
Yeah.
And literally mid-sentence, I just shut my mouth and I just take a time in. So where would you put this? Would you put this in T, or would you put this in R? Where would you put this?
I think this is definitely a action plan. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, this is one of the strategies that will fit in your action plan. And I think this also ties in with what we discussed earlier, where you talk to them and tell them that you will work on change, but you need them as partners.
Correct.
Right?
That's what.
That's exactly what we spoke about, right? So when we tell them that I'm learning on the path along with you, you help me, I'll help you. It's like, what better than that?
That's very human. That's what I've told my kids as well. That when I don't like it when you guys yell at me, and I'll do the same. And it's worked till now beautifully. Like it really has worked. Only a few times I think it did not, but I guess it's all about trying and fine tuning our strategies. Okay, that's great. So are you saying that using trace, we can actually realistically stop yelling at our kids altogether?
Well, Meghna, I would say it's not for nothing that there are zillions of books on habit building and habit breaking in the market. Research on the psychology of habit is a multi-million-dollar funded research. There are tons of books. And yelling is also a habit that is formed over time. And it is a habit that can be broken over time with consistency and with practice. And that is the whole rationale behind tracking your triggers, understanding what is causing, your behaviors. So I think, like we discussed, understanding the triggers and understanding where all this is coming from. It can be something that you've picked up. It can be due to the fact that you don't know another way to do it, right? But there are ways to break the habit, like we discussed. And like I said, mentioned before, the orange rhino mom, she had gone for 520 days with a no yell streak, and she still yelled at her kids one fine day. Right. So it's habits are very hard to break, but that doesn't mean that, it can't be done. But when she did it, when she yelled after the 520-day streak of not yelling, she was immediately able to
regulate herself,
immediately able to identify her triggers, first of all. So now she's thinking, oh, what happened now? All these days I was fine. I worked so hard at it.
Correct.
What's happening again? Right. So immediately identify triggers and course correct swiftly, because now she was more self-aware. So that's what tracking your habits does to you. Right. And another thing I have noticed in what has helped in my life, not only for this, but for many other things. I think it has helped a lot of other people. Is that when I do something that is not even related to this, right? Nothing related to parenting. That's something that I'm working on myself. For
Okay.
example, I want to get on a habit that I've been wanting to get on for a very long time. Let's just say I want to wake up in the morning and do a particular practice or a particular exercise, right? Now, this is for me, just for me. But when I do it, when I end up doing it successfully, I am not yelling at them anymore because I'm feeling good about myself. It's a keystone habit, right? So even a totally unrelated centering practice that will strengthen your own, self-awareness, habit and your own persona. I think that builds stabilizing behaviors in other aspects of your life as well. So in my experience, another thing that I've noticed is that a totally unrelated centering practice, like doing something for your own me time or to strengthen your own personal development practices, it can have a really strong impact on every other kind of thing that you want to change in your life, right? Or you want to establish in your life. So just concentrating on one keystone habit. For example, it could be just 5 minutes of quiet time in the morning, 5 minutes of meditation, or it could just be 10 minutes of journaling in the morning, or it could be just a walk, right, in the evenings. And it just makes you feel good. It just makes you feel that you have done something that has helped you in your long-term goals, and that actually kind of spreads across to other aspects of your life as well. And I have seen that it helps with my relationships. So
absolutely. So,
right?
it's interesting. You're looking at it from the lens of habits. This is the same thing I look at the lens of filling your cup.
Right.
So I meet countless women in therapy who come with the same issue. They are stressed beyond their minds. They are juggling 10 million things, their work, kids, kitchen, household, everything, right? And when I ask them, typically, in fact, I'm currently seeing 2 of these such women in therapy. When I ask them, what are you doing for yourself? How are you fulfilling your own emotional needs? You know what the answer is, Shobha? Unpredictably and unfortunately so, nothing. So I'm like, no wonder, you end up screaming at your kids, and no wonder you're dissatisfied in your couple relationship with your partner. No wonder you're stressed out of your mind. You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't really, you're pouring so much of yourself into everything, whether it's relationships, whether it's work, whether it's just management of stuff, right? And you can't do that on empty. You can't make a car run if there is no fuel in it. So so I look at it from the lens of filling one's emotional cup, which is so important, whether you're a man or a woman or a parent or a non-parent, whether you're a child or an adolescent. It is super duper important to, incorporate some of these grounding strategies or anything at all that sort of helps you take a pause and fill your cup.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks so much, Shobha. I hope all our listeners will really apply the TRACE strategies and use them to fill their own cup, as well as become more self-aware and yell less. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll join you again next week. This is Meghna and Devishobha signing off. So that's our episode for today. Thank you for listening to Big Talk About Tiny Humans, our podcast for parents and educators.
Hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to share it with your friends and family.
Listen and subscribe to Big Talk About Tiny Humans on the IVM Podcasts app, website, and all major audio platforms. We are available everywhere.
You can follow us on social media and online. Meghna is at The Therapist Mommy on Instagram and YouTube. And check out her website, raisingfamilyacademy.com, for a transformative course on raising a child with emotional intelligence.
And Devishobha is at Kidskintha on Twitter and Instagram. And check out kidskintha.com for in-depth articles and events on parenting and child development.
While you're at it, do also check out other great shows from the IVM Podcasts network at shows.ivmpodcasts.com. And IVM is on social media at IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
We'll catch you again on our next episode.
Remember the days when our granny used to narrate once upon a time stories? Let's bring back the good old days of moral stories with Storytime Tamil. Hi, I am Ravishankar Balachandran, host of Storytime Tamil podcast. I would like you to entertain and educate your children with stories from Storytime Tamil. Tune in to the new episode sharp at 7 p.m. every day on IVM website, IVM podcast app, YouTube channel, or wherever you get your podcast from.
Don't you think that if everyone around you is getting smart, you better be smarter? Hey there, I'm the traveling professor Siddharth Deshmukh, and I'm back with season 2 of my podcast to make you smarter. Smarter with Sid. What's this season's focus about? Well, it's about 10-minute nuggets that will make you stand out at work. It's time to go from smart to smarter. Tune in every Tuesday and Thursday and become smarter with Sid.